How can the habit of getting in and out of a chair on a daily basis be a major stumbling block when it comes to your lower back pain recovery? In this video, we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to go into a lot of detail on why the actions of sitting, getting up and getting down can be so problematic. And it really starts with how I'm sat right now while I'm talking to you. Let's get into today's video. Most of the tasks we're doing on a daily basis challenge our spine in two key ways. And sitting and the example of getting up and down out of a chair, especially a low one like this, really hits both of these points pretty hard. Number one is the flexion that it puts through the lumbar spine, that forward bending, the compression that's resulted in that, the stressing of tissues on the back part of the spine. That is the first part, or the first challenge. The second challenge for the lumbar spine is stasis, being still for extended periods. We see this when back pain bothers us first thing in the morning or halfway through the night. We see this after sitting down for a long period. We see this when we're driving for long periods. Stasis, being still, the body doesn't like that. It gives chance for inflammation to build up down here. That puts pressure on the nerves. You either get the back pain, that intense aching feeling in here, or we start to get the onset of those sciatic symptoms going down the leg as well. So those two things really are at the crux of the problems when it comes to your lower back. So why are these two things so problematic? Number one, most of the injuries that we've got that cause back pain, and when we talk about back pain, we talk about a back injury that causes pain in the lower back. It could be glutes, it could be down the leg, it could be all the way down the leg into the shin or into the foot. Classic sciatica type symptoms. Any number of those really apply when we're talking in this video about lower back pain. But often it's an injury in this section of the lumbar spine between 4-5 and L5-S1, whether it's a disc injury, a strain, etc. But it really means that these tissues have failed under the load of gravity. And then if we're going to be putting more load through them, through rounding of the lower back as we mentioned in number one, and number two, being very still with that rounded load, that strain on those tissues, we're invariably going to be creating more trouble. If we use the example of just some strain to the lower back, let's say there's a little bit of a disc problem in L4-5, and also maybe there's some ligamentous damage on the back. We'll look at this on the spine in a moment. But what is happening is the wound is trying to knit back together again and close itself back up. But as you're sat in a position, just like I'm sat here, not very well, you're stretching and pulling those tissues apart again and really impairing the healing process. If I, for example, take my knee here, if I've got a cut on my knee, we've all had this over the years, fallen down at some point, often as a child, and we get a scab on the knee. It's notoriously difficult and frustrating to heal first thing, in tissues that heal very quickly, by the way, unlike those discs in the lower back, because we bend our knee like this and we pull the scab back open again, and that creates problems. So why is getting in and out of the chair so difficult or so problematic? Well, there are a number of key challenges that this process has, and we'll go through them now. So when we talk about getting in and out of the chair, there are a number of challenges specifically that are going to be problematic. The first one is looking at the squat. Now this chair here, we've deliberately chosen this chair because it is a low chair. It's typical to the sort of chair that you might be lounging around in at home in the evening. Why is it a problem? It's so comfortable, I can sit back like so and really relax into here, but it creates its problems. It's low, just getting into the chair first and foremost. Now think about maybe your phase 2 squats, for example. Are you really squatting all the way down to here when you're doing a squat? Or, like most people, are you starting out with a reduced range of motion? You're starting out with a shallower squat, making sure that you squat with correct form, making sure that your back doesn't round. These things are very, very important. So when it comes to getting in and out of these chairs, you're squatting much lower than you would in your controlled phase 2 exercises or whatever other exercises we're doing. You're squatting very low, and often you don't have the strength to do so. So maybe we hold the arms and we kind of drop ourselves in for the last part or something like that, but it's just not good. So number two, chairs like this or even the office chair, it's so easy to slump back into them like so and really just relax, camp out here reading a book, watching TV. You see my back is perfectly round like a prawn. If I stand back up, I'm in that sort of position there. It's just not good when we have a back injury that we're trying to recover from. So kind of following on from that, we've essentially got prolonged flexion. Let's show you with the spine. Now we've got the lumbar spine, and we've mentioned before in this video, it's the L4-5, L5-S1, most likely the issue. But even if it's higher up, we're adjusting the structure of the spine. It should be nice and balanced like so. But when we're sat in prolonged flexion repeatedly day after day, we're putting strain through these ligaments. And you can see I'm doing a nice pelvic tuck here, flattening out that lumbar lordosis, pulling apart the ligaments that are trying to heal back up, maybe on the back of the disc, maybe in and around this interspinal segments here, that we're stretching those back out as they're trying to tighten back up and form a nice lordosis. We're doing it with a prolonged flexion. Not good for those discs, even though sometimes it can feel okay on these little nerve exit points because it makes the hole larger. That's a temporary relief and it's not good. And if you haven't seen the video on the YouTube channel about sitting, you should definitely check that one out now. Or maybe after the video. Finish this video and then go and check it out later. The final one here, again, this is going to come in with prolonged flexion, with rounding your back, with sort of sitting for that long period of time, and that's going to be the heat that builds up in your lower back. Now, unless you've got a cooled sofa, which is going to fan assist and cool that lower back down when you're sat there for a longer period of time, the area is going to heat up. We're going to get more fluid, a vascular shock to that area. It's going to get a sweaty back, and that's no good for the lower back. We know we should be using ice down there. If we're using heat, typically right before we then go to bed, get up out of that chair, nice bit of heat on the back, all of a sudden the problem starts to get worse as we get down into bed. So bear that in mind. We're doing heat on the lower back, you know, as we're sat down, just not a good idea. So we've been through a number of the problematic side of things when it comes to sitting down. Now let's go through some action points, because at the end of the day you need to know what's not to do, but then we need to know what to do to allow us to effectively move forwards and do some of these things. Because at the end of the day you can't just stand up in the living room all the time, because that's going to create its own challenges and its own difficulties. We do want to sit down at times, we want to do it in a sensible way, and we want to understand the challenges that we are facing. And there are other tasks in this series that there's no good way of doing it, but at least if we can acknowledge the challenges we face, we can get in, do that phase 1 routine afterwards, do a little bit of work to undo the bad things that this particular activity has, and then move on from there. So number 1 is going to be squat better. You know, if we aren't able to effectively squat at this range, we probably need to choose a different seat. But if we assume we've got a seat that we can actually squat into, and people just crash into normal dining chairs that are a lot higher than this chair here, but we want to squat, good form, core engaged, squat down into the chair, slowly lower ourselves as we go down, rather than just crashing and burning or just rounding the back to sit down. That's point number 1. Point number 2, it might be a little bit difficult for you to squat down into a chair like this, and please, with this video, we're not saying get a chair like this. That's a very, very important takeaway. This is just a nice one as an example, because a lot of people's sofas tend to be a little bit lower, and if your sofa or your chairs are higher than this, then these tips are going to be easier for you to apply. So the next one is use the arms. So yes, we want to do a good squat, yes, we want the core engaged, but use the arms to slowly lower ourselves into the chair. Don't just crash in. It makes a big difference. And really, really, just using those arms to help us out and in of the chair can really, really help. When we're coming out of the chair, core engaged, bum sticking out, nice neutral spine, feet planted, maybe the heels a bit closer to the chair than we otherwise would. None of this stuff tipping ourselves out. We want the heels back here. We want to get nice core engaged, arms, and just push up, and then we can take it from there with the legs. The next bit is going to be while you're sat down here, fidget. Move around, shuffle your position, move your body, just move around, don't sit for long periods. Remember, that prolonged stretch on the ligaments, on the discs in that lower back, it's that is going to put the change, or the wheels of motion for change in place, the sort of change we don't want. If we're regularly fidgeting around and moving about the place and getting into slightly different positions, that just helps make sure that one particular tissue isn't constantly stressed the whole time we're watching the TV. So the next one, if you're at your desk, this isn't going to work. But if you're sat in the sofa watching TV, then you can use a reclinable chair. Those reclinable chairs, obviously this not being one of them, but actually getting back into the chair and reclining a little bit so you're in this position with the support, which I'll discuss in a moment, that can be a little better. But we have to be mindful of getting back out of that position requires a little bit of work. We also have to think about the neck here, but we won't go into too much detail in this video for that. But essentially, we unrecline the chair, so we get back up into the upright position here. Then we want to move towards the end of the chair. Notice my spine was neutral during that position. I wasn't rounding like so. I've got a nice upright neutral spine and just sliding towards the end of the chair, and then we go back and we get out of the chair like so. So the next bit, we've seen it time and time again, is use a small rolled towel. Sit with your bum in the back of the chair like so, and then popping a small rolled towel in the lower back, exactly the same position as you would do your normal towel exercise, so that you've got that support for the lumbar spine. That way, you've got a nice support for the neutral arch, and we can sit there well on our sitting bones, not sat on our sacrum. Another one can be having a little bit of ice handy. You can always pop a little bit of ice in that lower back. Yes, you've got things like biofreeze as well. A little bit of ice in the lower back can make a difference. It just helps oppose the heating that we mentioned earlier in this video. If we are on a higher chair, we can obviously perch like I'm doing so here. By perching, I'm sat on the sitting bones on the edge of the chair. I can keep my body up nice and tall, and I'm in just a better position for the spine generally. This is great if you're going to be not sat down for a longer period. Rather than sitting all the way back in the chair, I'm just perched on the edge, I'm comfortable, I'm resting, but my spine is staying in a good position, and I'm ready to go pretty quickly without having to shuffle myself around, which is the topic of the next point. Hopefully you haven't been sat like this for a long period of time. And even if you've been sat well, remember that there's been strain on the lower back. And if you've been there for a long period of time, maybe missing out some of the earlier points that we mentioned we should be doing, which is not fidgeting and not sitting for an extended period, the most challenging point that we're not aware of is actually everything's relaxed into this position. Obviously this being a very, very bad position to be in, leg crossed all over the place. But as you initiate movement, remember what we were saying about the stretch earlier? Some of these joints have been stretched out. This is, for example, why when we talk about the towel exercise for the lower back, we talk about being very careful afterwards because things have been stretched out a little bit. Be very careful with your first movement. And the same should be when we get out of the chair. We should be slow, and hopefully you haven't been in this position, but we should be relatively slow when we are getting ourselves back towards the edge of the chair. Even if the doorbell rings, even if you get shouted at from the other room, make sure you move relatively slowly in those first few moments because that's when everything's getting back into its position, ready to go. So move, set yourself slowly, and then off we go. Don't rush out of the chair, especially if you've been there for a long period of time, because that's when people get caught out. One final little tip for you guys. We mentioned the towel before, but if we have furniture that's just not ideal, yes, most of you, this isn't going to apply to the dining table chair, the office chair, etc. But if we've got some of these sofas, we're not saying go out and buy new sofas. That's just not appropriate. Because many of these, once we have got rid of the back pain, we can sit in them effectively and they'll have no trouble. But something like this, using a large cushion at the back of the chair, just allows you, even this one here, my bum just squeezes a little bit under, so I'm supporting the lordosis, almost like having a mini towel there anyway. An extra towel to actually support that lumbar lordosis will do well, but actually this is doing a good job. Having that support there to just make the chair a little bit more upright makes life a little bit easier. We could take it a little step further and pop a cushion underneath the bum to just give our legs that downward angle rather than being at 90 degrees here, but that is really a little bit further than maybe you want to go with regards to changing the positions of your sofa by adding maybe a few too many cushions. So to round up this video in probably the best position that I've been in the whole video, we're sat nice and upright. Why is this important for the lower back? Well, most of these injuries that strain the lower back and activities that make the lower back worse come from compression, they come from flexion and rounding of the lower back. They also come from being in a position for a long period of time. We've covered a few key areas that this sort of thing, sitting in these sorts of chairs, can really challenge us, and we've also discussed some little tweaks and adjustments that you can make to hopefully make them a little bit easier. Yes, chairs like this, they're not ideal for you. They're too low, and many of you that are doing some of the phase 2 exercises just don't have the range of motion and strength through the effective range of motion to get down to this position effectively. But you're doing the right things to start to build that, and with time you will be able to do, like I've demonstrated on some of these on some of the squatting positions, you'll be able to get down here and do it safely and effectively, and then once your back pain's better, you can start to enjoy the chair a little bit more. It can be a more comfortable position, and some of those habits will have become ingrained and they'll be second nature and not so much of a chore for you. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and remember, give it a thumbs up if you're watching it on YouTube, and consider sharing it or subscribing to the channel if you're watching it there. And if you're watching it on the website, get on to the next unit. If you want to learn more about the premium Back in Shape membership, there's going to be a video somewhere underneath here. And if you want to stay up to date or tune in to some of our more recent live streams and the Q&As at the end of those, then that's going to be down here. And remember, you can subscribe to the channel up here and hit the notification bell to make sure you know when we next go live, so you can join us for our next live stream and Q&A.